Dear chosen one, you didn't scream, you didn't beg, you didn't even defend yourself, and yet she's unraveling, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, because your silence spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. You killed her obsession without a single word, and now, in the absence of your energy, she's spiraling. She thought you would chase, react, break, but you didn't. And that shook something deep inside her soul. Not because you wounded her, but because you stopped feeding the illusion she created about who you were and what you owed her. There's a spiritual breakdown happening behind the scenes, and you need to see it for what it really is. This isn't just someone missing you. This is someone collapsing without your light. What once looked like love was actually a hidden contract, a karmic grip masked as connection. And when you finally stood in your divine authority, when you refused to engage, to explain, to justify, that grip was broken. This video will reveal what most people never understand, how the chosen one's silence becomes divine warfare, and why she's now spiritually reaching, panicking, trying anything to feel your energy again. Have you ever felt that? Like someone was still pulling on your soul, even after you walked away? A bond that never brought peace, but still wouldn't let go? If this hits your spirit, you're not alone. Drop in the comments, "My silence was my deliverance." Don't forget to like the video and subscribe, because this story runs deeper than pain. It's about spiritual survival. And by the end of this message, you'll finally understand why her obsession had nothing to do with love and everything to do with power. She entered your life like a whisper, soft, subtle, and almost sacred. Something about her felt familiar, magnetic, even divine. You couldn't quite explain it, but your soul felt drawn. There was a current between you two that didn't need words. At first, it seemed like a blessing. The connection felt intense, spiritual, almost destined. But underneath the surface, something didn't feel right. You felt drained after conversations, confused after encounters. Your peace began to feel threatened, and your spirit, even before your mind, started sounding the alarm. You noticed her eyes held a strange mix of admiration and fear. It wasn't love. It was possession disguised as longing. She wasn't trying to grow with you. She was trying to hold you, and not with her hands, but with your own soul. The truth is, she was addicted to your light, not in a poetic way, but in a parasitic one. And you felt it. Every time you tried to breathe spiritually, she pulled you back into her emotional vacuum. You didn't owe her your presence, but she made you feel like you did. That was the first spiritual red flag. You were giving something that wasn't being returned. And yet, she didn't want to let go. She never said she was obsessed. She didn't have to. Her spirit told on her. The way she panicked at your silence, the way she needed constant proof that you still cared, the way her energy reached for you even when she pretended to be distant. She didn't want a relationship. She wanted control. She wanted you tethered, confused, orbiting around her emotional needs. And when you started pulling back, she started losing grip, not just of you, but of herself. Because your attention wasn't just attention, it was fuel. And when you stopped feeding the illusion, her whole identity began to shake. What she loved wasn't you. It was the feeling she had when she had access to you. Your calm, your power, your light. She felt like more when she was near you, but not because she wanted to rise, because she wanted to possess. And that's the difference between love and obsession. Obsession wants to own what it doesn't understand. Love wants to set it free. And you, chosen one, were never meant to be caged. You were sent to reflect, to awaken. But instead, you were being drained. Slowly, spiritually, repeatedly. Then something shifted. It didn't happen with fireworks or confrontation. It happened in silence. You stopped explaining. You stopped reacting. You didn't text back. You didn't argue. You simply disconnected. And that shook her, because for someone who relied on control, your stillness was chaos. She needed you loud to feel powerful, but you went quiet. And in that quiet, everything collapsed. She could no longer predict you. She could no longer feed on your empathy. And that's when the obsession truly began to die. Her spirit started reaching in panic, dreaming of you, stalking your energy, sending waves of emotional desperation, even if you weren't in touch. Because people like her don't fall in love with people, they fall in love with the feeling of being seen by someone divine. And when that mirror disappears, they don't know who they are anymore. She thought she could pull you back, that a few words, a few triggers, a few wounds reopened would bring you back to orbit. But what she didn't know is that God had already sealed that door. Heaven heard what your heart never had the chance to say. And the most terrifying thing for her is that you didn't say a single word. You didn't curse her out. You didn't expose her. You didn't even defend yourself. You simply withdrew your presence. And that was the most powerful statement you could ever make. Because silence, for a chosen one, is never empty. It echoes. It cuts deeper than any scream. And now, it's driving her mad. She tried to reach out again. Not with love, but with strategy. A sudden message, a vague memory, a carefully crafted, accidental post she knew you'd see. Every move was bait. She wasn't coming from the heart. She was coming from the wound. And that wound was screaming to get you back into orbit. But you felt it. You saw through the pattern. The energy behind her actions didn't match the words. It was still about pulling you in, not meeting you where you are. She didn't want connection. She wanted reaction. But your silence, anchored in divine clarity, was no longer something she could break through. You started remembering the weight of her energy, how your body felt tense after a call, how your spirit felt foggy after every interaction. You weren't just emotionally exhausted, you were spiritually drained. That's what happens when your divine essence is siphoned to uphold someone else's illusion. And for so long, you thought you were being kind. You thought maybe you owed her understanding, explanation, compassion. But you see now, your presence was never neutral. It was power. And every moment you gave it away to someone who only wanted to feed from it, you betrayed yourself just a little more. But not anymore. She noticed. She could feel the shift, not in something you said, but in everything you didn't. The quiet became her enemy. The space between responses became unbearable. And when she realized she couldn't trigger the old version of you anymore, that's when the panic really kicked in. Because what she truly needed was the you that still felt guilty. The version of you that explained, that apologized, that circled back to make sure she was okay, even when she was the one causing harm. But you buried that version, and you didn't need a funeral or a fight. You just outgrew it. So she tried to reinvent herself, a new mask, a softer tone. Maybe if she acted different, you'd come back. But even in the disguise, you sensed the old energy. The frequency hadn't changed. She still wanted to be seen by you, but she wasn't willing to see herself. And that's where the obsession grows. When someone demands your presence to avoid their own emptiness, when they chase your light instead of healing their darkness. She wasn't falling in love with you. She was falling into addiction. And your soul, chosen one, refused to be her drug. And while all of this was happening on the surface, something deeper was unraveling in the spiritual realm. You weren't just walking away from a toxic bond. You were breaking an ancient contract, a karmic thread that wrapped around your soul like silk, but tightened like chains. You didn't just kill her obsession. You severed the agreement that once made you accessible to her energy. That kind of rupture doesn't happen quietly in the spirit. It sends shockwaves. That's why her dreams are haunted. That's why her mind races without explanation. That's why she's spiraling, because energetically, she can feel that the door is sealed for good. And what's wild is that she doesn't even understand what's happening. Not fully. She just knows something inside her is unraveling. She can't focus, can't sleep, can't feel grounded. She tries to blame you, but deep down, she knows it's not your fault. It's your absence. Your energy used to stabilize her chaos. Not because she healed in your presence, but because she avoided her pain by clinging to your light. Now that light is gone, and she's left face to face with the very void she once used you to fill. That's not heartbreak, that's withdrawal. Spiritual withdrawal from a source she was never meant to own. So now she grasps for anything that will give her a sense of power again. She posts, she watches, she prays, but not for healing, for access. That's the difference. She's not asking God for closure. She's asking the universe to bring you back under her control. Maybe even turning to rituals, readings, or spiritual manipulations, trying to pull you back with invisible strings. But they don't work. They bounce off you like smoke. Because what she doesn't understand is that your silence was never passive. It was protection. It was sacred. And when heaven ordains separation, no force in hell can reverse it. She's spiraling, but not in public. No, she knows how to keep up appearances. She knows how to smile while internally screaming. But if you could hear the thoughts racing through her mind, you'd feel the spiritual chaos. She can't understand how someone she thought she had wrapped around her energy simply detached. You didn't fight. You didn't chase. And that is what's tearing her apart. Because for someone who survives on emotional leverage, your lack of response is more violent than any rejection. It's as if you became invisible to her spirit. And that, to a soul used to manipulating attention, is unbearable. But here's the deeper truth. Your silence didn't start the chaos. It only revealed it. That madness was already there, buried under charm, dressed as love, hidden behind spiritual language and mystical pretenses. She may have called it a soul tie, a deep connection, even divine union. But none of that was built on mutual growth. It was built on your willingness to diminish your own light to make her feel safe in her shadow. And now that you've stopped doing that, everything she built on your sacrifice is collapsing. That's not punishment. That's alignment. God is putting every spirit back where it belongs. And now, she's remembering everything you were. Your empathy, your peace, your depth. And realizing she never truly valued it. She tried to control it. And now that it's gone, she romanticizes it. That's what obsession does. It doesn't see clearly. It distorts. She paints you now as the one who got away, but she forgets she was never willing to grow alongside you. She only wanted to consume what you carried. And that's why it hurts so deeply now. Because she can feel that your soul is no longer even looking in her direction. And the silence, once seen as weakness, is now understood as power. You're not ignoring her to punish her. You're protecting your peace. You're not withholding to create suffering. You're choosing wholeness. And what she cannot comprehend is that the version of you who used to need her validation no longer exists. You don't need her to see your worth. You don't need closure. You don't even need to explain. Because when the soul matures, it loses the appetite for chaos. And chosen one, you've outgrown the cycle. You've healed beyond the bait. And your silence isn't absence. It's completion. It's the end of a karmic loop that tried to recycle your pain into bondage. Spiritually, that kind of growth isn't neutral. It sends a message into the atmosphere. It says, I no longer agree with this pattern. And heaven responds by closing the door, permanently. That's what she's feeling now. A door that no longer opens when she knocks. A portal that no longer recognizes her vibration. You didn't just walk away, you ascended. And there's a cost to ascension. People who depended on the old version of you can't come. Not because you hate them, but because your soul has shifted dimensions. And the obsessive grip they once had doesn't reach where you now stand. And so she watches, quietly, silently, maybe even pretending she's moved on. But you feel it, the tension in the spirit, the lingering presence in your dreams, the random waves of anxiety that aren't even yours, because she's still trying to reach you, energetically. Not because she wants healing, but because she wants access. And this is where discernment matters most. You must recognize that not every soul trying to reconnect deserves re-entry. Some are only knocking because the light they used to steal is no longer available, and your peace now is guarded by God Himself. You see, this was never about winning or revenge. It was about revelation. God didn't expose her to humiliate her. He revealed the pattern so you could be free, so you could see that not every spiritual connection is divine. Some are assignments from the enemy dressed as soulmates, and your silence became the proof. When you stopped reacting, the true nature of the bond was revealed. It wasn't love, it was addiction. It wasn't mutual, it was manipulation. And in that stillness, the truth roared, not just to her spirit, but to yours. And that truth is what finally set you free. She's not just obsessing over you, she's obsessing over the control she lost. And here's the hidden truth most people don't understand. Obsession isn't always about desire, it's about power. What she really misses is the ability to shift your emotions, to send one message and throw off your day, to make one post and watch you spiral in confusion. She misses the grip she had on your peace, and now, stripped of that power, she's panicking. Not because she lost love, but because she lost the emotional leverage she secretly depended on. And that's the root of spiritual obsession, the hunger to own someone's inner world. So now, she's reaching into places she never would have touched before, consulting energy workers, watching tarot readings, even playing with dark spiritual tools, not to heal, but to manipulate, to bend the spirit world in her favor, to find a way back in through invisible doors. But here's the divine irony. She's chasing the very soul that heaven is now protecting. God placed a veil between you and her, a spiritual firewall. Not because she's evil, but because the connection had become poisonous to your purpose. And when your mission is higher, certain people become spiritual liabilities, even if they come in the name of love. And now, all her attempts feel like echoes. Her words fall flat. Her rituals backfire. The very energy she's trying to send out returns to her tenfold, because God doesn't honor manipulation, even if it comes dressed as longing. You, chosen one, are not spiritually available to those who once used your light to avoid their shadows. And whether she realizes it or not, she's running into a divine wall, a holy silence, a supernatural distance, one that no message, no memory, no magic can penetrate. Because God isn't just protecting you from her presence, He's protecting you from her reach. She thought you'd always be accessible, that no matter how many times she pulled back, she could always return and find your spirit open. But this time, something changed. You didn't just go silent, you unplugged the entire system. She's calling into a space you no longer occupy. Energetically, emotionally, spiritually, you've moved on. And it's driving her insane, because she doesn't know how to exist outside your response. That's how deeply her identity was tied to your energy. And now, with nothing to feed from, she's left alone with the one thing she's been avoiding all along: herself. But let's be honest, there was a time you would have gone back. There was a time when her silence would have pulled you in, when the fear of losing her, the hope of changing her, or the guilt of leaving her broken would have been enough to reopen the door. But not anymore. This time, you're not the same. You're not negotiating your peace. You're not sacrificing your soul for potential. You've learned, and it wasn't easy. You cried, you questioned, you even blamed yourself, but you walked through that fire. And now you stand on the other side, wiser, cleaner, freer. And that's why she can't reach you. Because you're not who you were. Now you see it all clearly. What once felt like love was actually spiritual entrapment. What once felt like destiny was, in truth, distraction. She wasn't sent to elevate you. She was sent to test you, to see if you'd finally choose yourself. And you did. Not with revenge, not with rage, but with stillness, with sacred detachment. That's how the chosen ones move. Not with drama, but with discernment. Not with noise, but with divine clarity. And now, as she spins in confusion, you stand in peace. Not because she lost, but because you finally won the battle within yourself. Because this wasn't just about her. This was about what you allowed. About who you thought you had to be in order to feel loved. About the old version of you that tolerated being drained because you thought it was your job to fix broken people. But now, you understand. You are not a rehab center for spiritually addicted souls. You are a vessel of purpose, a being of light. And anyone who enters your space must come healed, not hunting, aligned, not clinging, chosen, not chasing. And she wasn't ready for that. She wasn't ready for someone who couldn't be seduced by pain, who didn't confuse chaos with passion, who didn't interpret drama as proof of love. You, chosen one, have evolved beyond that, and that's what broke the spell. You stopped participating in the narrative. You stopped being the savior in someone else's crisis. You stopped translating manipulation as connection. That kind of clarity, to a soul still operating from shadow, feels like betrayal. But it's not betrayal, it's transformation. And those who are addicted to dysfunction will always call healing abandonment. That's what she's doing now, trying to make your silence mean you're heartless, when in truth, it's the most loving thing you've ever done for both of you, because your silence forced her to meet herself, to sit in the room with the parts of her she was using you to escape, the need to be desired, the fear of abandonment, the deep-rooted belief that control equals safety. Without your energy, all of it came rushing to the surface, and that's the part of the story she never wanted to write. She was prepared for conflict, prepared for chaos, but not for stillness. Stillness reveals. It strips everything away, and what's left is the truth she's avoided for so long. She wasn't in love, she was afraid, and you were just the safest place to hide from herself until you became unavailable. Unavailable not because you blocked her, but because you grew. And when the soul matures, it changes frequency. It no longer matches the vibration of trauma bonding. It no longer finds excitement in being needed. It no longer needs to explain its absence. You've become the version of yourself that only entertains peace, that no longer argues to be understood, that no longer breaks your own spirit to make someone else feel whole. And that version of you is dangerous to the system she created, not because you're cruel, but because you can no longer be controlled. You can no longer be consumed. And maybe, just maybe, that's why she can't stop thinking about you. Not because of what you said, but because of what you didn't. Because of how you left. Because of how you never looked back. That kind of ending haunts the spirit. It creates echoes in the soul. She doesn't miss conversations. She misses access. She doesn't miss your face. She misses the way your light made her darkness feel seen, but not judged. And now, without that mirror, she doesn't know who she is. That's not love. That's spiritual identity crisis, and it's not your burden to carry anymore. And still, even after all this, there's a part of you that wonders if you were too cold, if you should have done more, explained more, been softer. That's because you have a soul, a real one, and real souls always feel the weight of their absence. But this time, you didn't leave with malice. You left with clarity, and that makes all the difference. You didn't ghost her. You didn't play games. You simply honored the truth. And if that truth was too much for her to accept, then your presence would have been too much for her to carry. Sometimes, leaving is the kindest thing you can do. because staying would have lied. Now, the silence is sacred. It's not just the absence of noise, it's the presence of peace. It's the divine confirmation that you've healed the part of you that once needed to be chosen by someone who didn't know your worth. You chose yourself. You chose God. You chose alignment. And that alignment sealed the portal she keeps trying to walk through. She doesn't understand how silence can be so loud, how absence can echo so long. But that's because she never learned the language of peace. She only spoke chaos. And now that peace is your new native tongue. She can't understand you anymore. And here you are, not broken, not bitter, just still. Still in your knowing, still in your light, still in your sacred detachment. That's the mark of a soul who survived obsession and chose wholeness instead. You didn't kill her with cruelty. You killed the obsession with healing. You didn't destroy her. You just stopped feeding the parts of her that needed to use you to survive. And in doing so, you finally came home to yourself, to your purpose, to your voice, and to the version of you who doesn't need to be anything for anyone, except fully aligned with God. There's something sacred about a soul that chooses silence over chaos, that walks away without needing to prove, convince, or destroy. You didn't need to burn the bridge, because God already closed the road. That's the wisdom of the chosen one. You move when heaven moves. You disconnect when the divine whispers, "Enough." And even if the world never sees what you endured, heaven saw everything. Your silence was a prayer, a boundary, a declaration of your worth. And while she's screaming in the invisible, trying to resurrect a bond that's spiritually dead, you're resting, not in apathy, but in alignment, not in arrogance, but in peace. And that's what she can't access anymore, your peace. If this message reached you deep in your soul, don't keep it to yourself. Drop a comment below and write, "Peace is my final answer." Like this video if it brought you clarity, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel with the notification bell on so you don't miss the next spiritual message waiting for you. I also want to thank every single one of you who supports this mission through Buy Me a Coffee. Your generosity allows us to go deeper, grow stronger, and bring even more powerful content to those who need it. If you'd like to support too, the link is in the pinned comment below. Watch the next video that's showing up on your screen now, or dive into the full playlist and let your spirit receive what it's been waiting for. I'll see you there, chosen one. Stay strong, stay silent, and stay extraordinary.